The desert does not forgive mistakes. It does not care about rank, reputation, or the medals pinned to your chest. It does not bow to arrogance, and it does not reward pride. The desert simply watches, silent and ancient, as men make decisions that will either save lives or end them. And on the morning of April 14th, in a remote stretch of rocky highland terrain 40 kilometers south of the Syrian border, the desert was about to watch something that no one in that compound would ever forget for the rest of their lives. The compound sat low against the hillside like a wound that refused to heal. 3 concrete structures arranged in a rough triangle, surrounded by a perimeter wall pocked with bullet scars from engagements that had come and gone over the previous decade. The kind of place that had seen too much history and none of it good. Guard towers at the northeast and southwest corners. Motion sensors along the eastern approach. A diesel generator humming somewhere behind the main building, its vibration traveling through the packed earth like a pulse. And inside somewhere, music. In the third structure, the one with a reinforced door and the blacked-out windows, 7 hostages. 7 American aid workers who had been taken 12 days ago from a convoy that had strayed 40 meters off the approved route. 40 meters. That is how small the difference is between being safe and being taken. Captain Jordan Reeves of SEAL Team 7 had been staring at the satellite imagery for 11 hours straight. His eyes were red at the edges, his jaw carrying 3 days of stubble, and his tactical vest was still damp from the river crossing they had made 4 hours before dawn. He was 38 years old, 15 years in the teams, and he had run operations in 6 countries across 2 continents. He was not a man who frightened easily, and he was not a man who doubted himself, but he was on this particular morning a man who was deeply, profoundly, and perhaps fatally wrong about one thing. He was wrong about the sniper assigned to cover his team's extraction. "Command, this is Reeves. We are in position. Confirmed support assets are staged." His voice was low and even, the kind of voice that had been trained by years of controlled situations into something that almost never changed pitch regardless of what was happening around him. The radio crackled. Then a voice came back calm and measured. "Reeves, this is command. All assets confirmed. Staged. Your Overwatch position is occupied. Call sign Phantom 1 is set." Reeves looked at the small photograph clipped to his mission brief. Sergeant First Class Maya Vasquez, 29 years old, Army 75th Ranger Regiment, transferred to Joint Operations Support 18 months prior. 111 confirmed engagements. 43 confirmed long-range eliminations at distances exceeding 800 m. Longest confirmed shot on record for her unit, 1,240 m in a crosswind and failing light against a moving target. He had studied her file for approximately 4 minutes before setting it aside. "She's never run an OP this hot," he said to no one in particular. His second lieutenant commander, Derek Shaw, looked up from the terrain map. "Her numbers are good, boss. Numbers on paper and numbers in the field are different animals." "Sure, she's been in the field. She's been in support roles. She's never held Overwatch on a compound extraction with 7 lives, depending on her calls." Reeves folded the photograph back into the mission brief. "Give me someone from Bravo Unit's sniper section. Bravo snipers on the muscle tasking. They are 400 kilometers away. Then we run with reduced Overwatch coverage and compensate with speed." Shaw said nothing for a moment. Then he said very carefully, "She's supposed to cover our northeast exposure. That's where the second guard tower is. If she's not on station, I heard you." "Sure." Then we proceed with Phantom 1 on station. Reeves picked up his rifle and chambered around. "She holds the northeast sector. If she can't make the calls in time, we pull back and abort. But I want 2 of our people watching that tower independently." He did not say what he was thinking. He did not say that he did not trust a 29-year-old woman who had never operated at this tempo to carry the weight of 7 American lives on her shoulders. He did not say it, but the men around him read it in every line of his body. In the way he turned away from the photograph, in the way he issued the redundant coverage order as though Phantom 1 simply did not exist. 800 meters away, stretched flat against the cold rock of a ridgeline that commanded a perfect 360 view of the compound and the surrounding terrain, Maya Vasquez heard none of this. She did not need to. She already knew exactly what they thought of her, and she had decided some time ago to let her work do the talking. She had been in position since 25 hours, 4 hours and 4 to 7 minutes of absolute stillness. Her body pressed into the ghillie suit she had custom modified herself. Not the standard issue version, but one she had painstakingly adapted over 6 months with local vegetation samples matched to the specific terrain profile of this region. From a distance of 15 m, lying perfectly still, she was indistinguishable from the rocky scrub land around her. From 50 m, she was invisible. From 200 meters, she simply did not exist. Her rifle was an Accuracy International AXMC platform chambered in 338 Lapua Magnum custom fitted stock adjusted to her specific shoulder geometry. Schmidt and Bender PM2 scope 5 to 25 power magnification. She had zeroed this weapon at 800 m in control conditions and then verified the zero under 4 different wind and temperature scenarios across the previous 72 hours. She knew this rifle the way some people know the faces of people they love. Every characteristic, every tendency, every minute imperfection that she had learned to compensate for so automatically that the compensation itself had become invisible. Her spotter, Corporal James Okshafor, was 18 in to her left and slightly behind. 24 years old, born in Lagos, raised in Baltimore, trained at Fort Benning, and then at the prestigious Scout Sniper course at Quantico. He and Maya had worked together for 14 months. In those 14 months, they had developed the kind of communication that required almost no words. A system of gesture, breath, and shared understanding built from hundreds of hours of shared space and shared danger. Okafor was watching the compound through his spotting scope, Cout TSN 883 with a fluorite glass objective. He was reading the wind from 3 separate visible indicators. The drift of smoke from the generator exhaust, the movement of a piece of fabric caught on the perimeter wire, and the barely perceptible shimmer of heat distortion rising from the packed earth of the compound yard. Northeast Tower Guard is rotating ochre form murmur. His voice was barely louder than the wind. 12-minute pattern. He was at the east corner 3 minutes ago. He'll be at the north face in approximately 9 minutes. Copy, Moss said. Her voice was equally quiet. She did not move. Her eye remained fixed to the scope, cycling through a slow, methodical survey of the compound that she had already completed 11 times since she had taken position. She was not looking for something new. She was verifying that nothing had changed, that the pattern she had memorized over the previous 4 hours of observation remained intact. 7 guards visible, 2 in towers, 3 rotating on foot patrol in a pattern that brought them to their respective corners every 8 to 14 minutes with enough variation to indicate they were operating on randomized patrol schedules rather than fixed rotations, which meant someone competent was running their security protocols. 1 guard at the main gate, stationary. 1 guard outside what appeared to be the vehicle bay, also largely stationary, but with a tendency to drift 15 to 20 meters along the south wall every 30 to 40 minutes. Plus however many were inside. That was the variable. That was always the variable. Team is moving, Okafor said. Reeves just gave the approach signal. Maya shifted her scan to the northwest. Below and to her left, almost perfectly invisible in the shadow of the terrain, she could see the slight disturbance of movement that was SEAL Team 7 beginning its approach. 7 operators moving in a textbook staggered column, hugging the dead ground, using every folding crease in the terrain to stay below the sight lines of the guard towers. Reeves at the lead, short his shoulder. The other 5 spread behind them in a pattern that maintained tactical spacing while maximizing mutual coverage. They were good. They were very, very good. Maya watched them and felt something that was not quite admiration and not quite concern. It was more like the feeling you get when you watch someone you respect walking toward a problem that only you can fully see, because from 800 meters above and behind the compound, Maya Vasquez could see something that Reeves and his team could not. The southeast corner of the compound wall had a shadow that did not match the angle of the early morning light. She had noticed it 4 to 7 minutes ago. She had watched it for 23 minutes before she was certain. There was a man behind that wall who was not on any of the surveillance photographs. not in any of the intelligence briefings. Someone who was either a new addition to the guard rotation and this was the possibility that had been sitting cold in Maya's stomach for the last 24 minutes. Someone who had been placed there specifically because someone inside that compound knew or suspected that an extraction attempt was coming. She keyed her radio. Command Phantom 1, I have an unidentified static in the southeast sector, not on the intel package. Requesting confirmation of compound personnel count. A pause. Then Phantom 1. Last confirmed count was 9 personnel. I'm observing what appears to be a 10th. Southeast exterior wall interface, approximately 15 m north of the south gate. Has been static for at least 40 minutes. Another pause. Longer. This time she could hear the subtle edge of consultation in the background noise of the channel. Phantom 1. We cannot confirm. Use your judgment. Maya exhaled slowly. Use your judgment. The 4 words that translated in operational language to "we don't know" and "the decision is yours." And if you're wrong, the consequences belong to you. She had heard those 4 words before. She had learned to sit inside them without flinching. She went back to her scope. The shadow in the southeast was still there. The man. She was certain now it was a man. The subtle shape of a shoulder and the edge of a weapon barrel visible in the way the shadow fell was not moving. He was waiting. He was waiting for the team to come through the gate. Okafor, she said quietly. I have a shot on the southeast attic, approximately 720 m. Wind is 3 km/h northeast to southwest. Temperature is holding at 11 C. What are you reading for density altitude? Okafor checked his Kestrel weather meter without lifting his eye from the spotting scope. Density altitude is 840 feet. You've got a half MOA right correction build into your current dope. Confirmed. She made a fractional adjustment to her turret. Not the full correction, a half correction because the shot was downward at approximately 15 degrees of angle and the wind was crossing at a geometry that partially offset the density altitude effect. She had run these calculations in her head without a ballistic calculator in approximately 4 seconds. She had been running calculations like this for 10 years. The team was 350 m from the main gate. They were committed. Reeves came up on the team channel. All elements standby for breach. Northwest and southwest towers are our primary concern. Phantom 1 confirmed northeast tower guard position. Northeast tower guard is at the north face facing outward. He has not observed the approach team. Copy. We go on my mark. Maya's breathing had slowed to 8 breaths per minute. At 8 breaths per minute, the movement of the chest during respiration creates approximately 0.4 millimeters of scope movement at full magnification. She had trained herself over years to squeeze the trigger during the Nancon pause between exhale and the next inhale. The natural respiratory pause when the body is perfectly still. The window is approximately 1.5 seconds. In 1.5 seconds, a trained sniper can complete the entire trigger press sequence from first contact to firing. She was not thinking about this. It had long since ceased to be thought and had become something closer to breathing itself. Mark Reeves said, the team began moving forward at speed, and the shadow in the southeast corner of the compound wall began to move. Maya fired. The sound of the 338 Lapua Magnum leaving the barrel was a single clean crack, sharp and definitive. The kind of sound that does not echo so much as an ounce. 722 m away, the man who had been waiting behind the southeast wall dropped straight down without drama. Without sound, without warning, he had been standing one moment and he was gone the next. The way a candle flame simply ceases to exist when the air above it changes. In the northeast tower, the god's head turned sharply toward the sound. Okafor said, Northeast tower is reactive. Is looking southeast. I see him. Masseter Bolt was already cycling, her scope already transitioning. The northeast tower was not 722 m. It was 831 m. The angle was different. The wind had a slightly different vector at that distance because the compound wall created a minor deflection effect. She adjusted, not the turret. There was no time for the turret. She held the correction in her mind, translating the ballistic data she had memorized into a precise aim point offset from center that existed only in her understanding of the physics. The guard in the northeast tower was bringing his radio to his mouth. She fired 831 M. The radio fell. The guard fell. Elapsed time since Reeves called Mark. 11 seconds. The compound had not yet raised an alarm. Inside the main gate, Reeves and his team were moving through the yard. Fast, fluid, the kind of movement that only comes from 10,000 hours of repetition. Two elements splitting left and right toward the primary structures, covering each other's movement in the practice choreography of people who have trained for exactly this scenario. The diesel generator was louder here, a steady mechanical pulse that masked the sound of boots on packed earth. The smell of diesel exhaust and old concrete, and something else, something organic and not quite right. Hanging in the cold morning air, Reeves was heading for the third structure, the one with the hostages. Shaw was at his right shoulder. Northwest Tower is Clay. Southwest Phantom 1, this is Shaw. Southwest Tower status. Maya's voice came back immediately. Southwest Tower guard went inside the structure at the base of the tower 7 minutes ago. He has not returned. I do not have eyes inside the structure. Recommend treat as unknown. Copy that. Shaw looked at Reeves. We need to clear that before we breach the hostage structure. It'll cost us 2 minutes. It'll cost us more if he comes out on hour 6 during the breach. Reeves acknowledged this with a single nod. He directed 2 operators, Petty Officers Chin and Ramirez, toward the safe West Tower base. They moved. Meanwhile, on the ridge line, Maya was doing what she had been doing since 02:15, watching everything. Her scope was cycling through a continuous survey pattern, never pausing long enough on any single point to become fixed, always moving in the practiced rhythm that allowed her to maintain awareness of the full compound. Simultaneously, she was watching the main gate which her team had come through and which remained surprisingly concerning, still open behind them. She was watching the vehicle bay on the south wall, where the drifting guard had moved back to his central position and was now looking toward the northeast tower with the slow, puzzled expression of a man who has heard something but is not yet sure what he heard. She was watching the main structure, the one with the blacked-out windows where a sliver of light had appeared at the edge of one of the window frames. Someone inside had just turned on a light. I lifted a blackout curtain to look out. Either way, it meant someone inside was awake and alert. She keyed the radio. Reeves Phantom 1. Activity in the main structure. First floor, second window from the north end. Someone just lit up or is looking out. Cannot confirm number of personnel. Reeves did not break stride. Copy. How many warm bodies are you tracking in the compound? I have 5 remaining from the original roster, minus the 2 I engaged at breach. Your 2 men are moving on the southwest tower base. I have a vehicle bay guard in my scan. I have 1 possible inside the main structure. That accounts for 5 of the remaining 7. 2 are unaccounted for. Where are they? Unknown. Possibly inside either the main structure or the hostage structure. Possibly in positions I don't have angle on. A pause. There's a drainage ditch along the east wall that I cannot observe from my current position. It runs approximately 30 m along the wall, and it is deep enough to conceal a standing man. Reeves stopped just for a second. Then he said very deliberately, "Sure, east wall drainage ditch on it." Shaw redirected 2 more operators toward the eastern approach. And this was the moment. Standing in the compound yard in the gray pre-dawn light with his team split across 3 simultaneous tasks, and 7 hostages 60 m away behind a reinforced door. That Jordan Ree had a thought that he would not admit to anyone for months afterward. He had the thought that the woman on the ridge line was very, very good at her job. The drainage ditch along the east wall contained 2 men. Petty Officer Martinez saw them first. 2 figures pressed into the shadow of the ditch. Both armed, both dressed in the same dark militant clothing as the rest of the compound security force. They were watching the main gate with the focused intensity of men who were waiting for something specific. They had not yet looked toward the yard because whatever they expected to come through that gate, they expected it to announce itself. They expected noise, breach charges, the sound of engines. They did not expect 7 men moving in absolute silence through the gray morning light. Martinez and his partner, Petty Officer Jackson, engaged them simultaneously at a distance of 14 m. No sound, no alarm. The two figures in the drainage ditch were simply there one moment and gone the next. The count was now 8 down. One unknown plus, however, was inside. The breaching team reached the hostage structure. The door was reinforced steel set into a concrete frame hinged inward with what looked like a mechanical drop bar on the inside. Standard breach charge would work, but it would also announce their presence to anyone inside who was still conscious and armed. The charge would make noise. The noise would travel, and if there was anyone in that main structure who was watching the second window from the north end. Phantom 1 main structure activity. Window is clay. I am not observing active surveillance from that position. However, I want you to know that I have been watching that window for the last 4 minutes, and I have not seen movement since the initial light change. That could mean the observer has moved away from the window. It could mean they're watching from a position inside the room that does not require them to be visible at the window frame. You think it's a threat, a brief pause? I think it is an unknown. And in my experience, unknowns in compounds like this tend to resolve badly. Reeves made the decision in less than 3 seconds. He pulled Chun from the safe west tower position, which had been cleared. The guard inside subdued without engagement and positioned him on the main structure with instructions to immediately engage any armed individual who exited or appeared to the ground floor windows. Then he nodded to the breacher. The charge was placed. The team stacked behind it. 3, 2, 1, the door blew inward with a sound like a thunderclap at close range, and Ree was through it before the echo had time to form. His weapon up, his light on, sweeping the interior with the controlled aggression of someone who has crossed a threshold like this dozens of times and learned in the most consequential possible way that hesitation costs lives. 7 people, all alive, all in varying states of distress. 2 were sitting against the far wall with their arms bound behind them. 3 were lying on what appeared to be military-style carts. 1 was standing in the corner near what looked like a water supply. In 1, a young woman in her mid-20s, her face marked with a particular hollowness that comes from 12 days of captivity and not enough food, was standing in the center of the room, arms out as though she had been waiting for the door to open. American military, she said. Yes. Reeves stepped forward. You're all going home right now. And that was when the main structure opened fire. It was not 1 shooter. It was 4. The main structure, which the intelligence package had categorized as a logistics and administration building, was apparently also a fullback fighting position fitted at some point in the recent past with reinforced window frames and the kind of firing ports that you do not install unless you're planning for exactly this scenario. For gunmen positioned at the 4 ground floor windows facing the yard, opening up simultaneously with assault rifles on fully automatic, pouring fire into the space between the main structure and the hostage structure at a combined rate that turned the open yard into something that was no longer crossable. Ramirez went down immediately, not killed, hit in the upper thigh, a through and through that would be serious but not fatal if he got treatment in the next 30 minutes. He was able to move, dragging himself toward the shelter of the hostage structure's exterior wall. His own weapon still up, still returning fire. Shaw took cover behind a concrete water storage tank. His team spread in whatever cover the yard offered, which was not much. Chun was on the far side of the main structure from the firing ports, which meant he was effectively out of the fight for the moment, unable to move around to engage without crossing an open angle. 831 meters away. Maya Vasquez did not need the radio to tell her what was happening. She could see all of it. The firing ports, the muzzle flashes, the positions of every member of the team in the yard. She could see Ramirez on ground, and she could see the angle of fire that was keeping him there, and she could see exactly what needed to happen. And the only question that had ever mattered in situations like this was whether she could make it happen fast enough. For shooters, main structure, she said into the radio. Her voice had not changed. Ground floor, all 4 windows facing the yard. I have angle on 3 of the 4. Window 4 is partially obstructed by the water storage tank. Aka 4, I need you to move 15 northeast to give me angle on window 4. Okafor was already moving. In the world of precision sniper teams, spotters do not ask why they move. Shaw, this is Phantom 1. I need your team down. Get flat and stay flat for the next 40 seconds. Shaw's voice came back strained and clipped. We're taking fire. I know. Get flat. A moment's hesitation. The kind that a man who has been taught his entire career to distrust assets he does not know generates automatically. Then Shaw's voice in the team channel. All elements get flat. Now the SEAL team went flat. Maya began. Window 1 was 806 m from her position at the specific angle she was using. The shooter in window 1 was partially visible. She could see his right shoulder and the barrel of his weapon and the edge of his profile when he leaned into the fire. Not a full body shot, not even close to a clean headshot, but the edge of a profile at 806 m is enough if you know exactly where the rest of the person's body is behind what you can see. She knew. She fired. Window 1 empty. Window 2 was 818 m, a slightly different angle, and the shooter there had pulled back slightly from the port to reload, which meant she had approximately 2 seconds before he would be back in position and back in the fight. She did not wait for him to reappear. She placed a round through the center of the firing port aperture itself, the space through which he would have to lean forward to shoot, and waited. He came back to the port and found the bullet waiting for him. Window 2 empty. Window 3 required correction because the structure's exterior wall had a slight protrusion at the roofline that created a visual distortion at this angle and distance. A distortion she had identified and measured and accounted for during the previous 4 hours of observation. She accounted for it now automatically. The way she accounted for the wind and the temperature and the density, altitude, all of it running simultaneously in the extraordinary computational machinery of a mind that had been trained to this specific purpose. She fired. Window 3. Okafor was in position. I got window 4, he said. Shooter is at the right edge of the port, taking angle on your breach team's position. Give me the hold. Half MOA left, quarter MOA down. Wind has shifted to southeast at this angle. 2 kilometers per hour. Full correction. Maya applied the corrections in the time it takes to draw breath. Squeezed. Window 4 empty. Elapsed time from first shot to fourth shot. 14 seconds. The compound yard was silent. Then Jordan Reeves' voice came up on the radio, and it sounded like a man who had just recalculated several things simultaneously. Phantom 1. Are all 4 shooters down? Confirmed. All 4 windows are clay. Compound yard is clear of active hostile fire. I am continuing to observe for additional threats. A pause. A long one. How long have you been on station? Since 02:15. Another pause. That's almost 5 hours. Yes, sir. Reeves looked out across the compound yard. His team was rising from the flat positions. Ramirez was being attended to. The 7 hostages were being secured for movement. Everything was proceeding exactly as it should proceed along a timeline that was still within the extraction window, with casualties at 1 man temporarily down rather than the catastrophic outcome that 4 automatic weapons firing into a confined space with no cover should have produced. It should have been a disaster. It was not a disaster. He looked up at the ridge line, 800 m away, rocky and featureless, no visible sign that anyone was there at all. He looked for 20 seconds, saw nothing, and then he reached for his radio. Phantom 1, this is Reeves. I need to know something. Go ahead. I pulled 2 additional operators to cover your sector because I did not think you could handle the Northeast independently. A silence. Not hostile, just a silence. I know, Maya said. I was wrong. Another silence then. Yeah, you were. If there was satisfaction in her voice, it was the quietest possible version of it. The kind that does not need to announce itself because it already knows its own weight. 12 confirmed hostiles. 5 minutes and 41 seconds of active engagement. All 7 hostages recovered alive. 1 friendly WI, non-life-threatening. Those were the numbers that would appear in the after-action report. They do not fully capture what it means to lie on cold rock for 5 hours without moving and then execute 14 seconds of precision fire with perfect calmness in the middle of a firefight, accounting for wind and distance and angle and obstruction and time pressure, hitting 4 different targets at distances ranging from 806 to 831 m. None of them clean shots. All of them taken in the specific compressed window of opportunity that opens and closes in a firefight like a door in a high wind. They do not capture what it means to notice a shadow that does not match the light 4 to 7 minutes before the operation begins, and to trust your own observation against the weight of an intelligence package that says something different, and to make the call. They do not capture what it means to do all of this in front of a man who had already decided you were not good enough, and to do it anyway. Not to prove him wrong, though you do prove him wrong, but because 7 people inside a compound with a reinforced door are counting on you. Even though they do not know your name, even though they will never know what you did for them on a cold hillside 800 from where they were being held, they do not capture any of that. Numbers rarely do. 4 hours later, at the forward operating base where the extraction team had assembled for the debrief, Jordan Reeves was sitting across a folding table from Maya Vasquez for the first time in person. She was not what he had expected. He was not sure exactly what he had expected. Something more immediately visible, perhaps some quality that he could have pointed to and said, "Yes, that is obviously someone exceptional." But she looked like a soldier, tired, slightly dusty from the field. The particular flatness in the eyes that comes from operational intensity followed by the long drive back through uncertain terrain. She was drinking coffee from a metal cup, and she had her notebook open on the table in front of her filled with her own handwritten calculations, range estimates, wind readings, correction data that she recorded after every operation as a matter of personal discipline. Reeves sat down across from her and did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, "Walk me through the southeast static." Maya turned a page in her notebook. I picked him up at 0347. He was in a position that was not visible in any of the surveillance photography, because the photography was all taken during daylight hours at angles that did not capture the shadow geometry of the interior east wall. At night, with a thermal scope, you could see the heat signature of a person pressed against a concrete wall, even through their own concealment. If you're at the right angle and you give it enough time, you're on thermal. For the first 2 hours, I transitioned to optical when light came up, but by then I had already fixed his position. She looked at the notebook. He was a static weight ambush. He was placed there specifically to engage anyone entering through the main gate. He would have been invisible to your team until you were inside the perimeter. Ree was quiet for a moment. How many of my men would that position have taken? Depending on his weapon, which appeared to be an RPK based on the outline I was able to observe, and depending on his discipline, that position at that distance from the gate could have engaged 4 to 6 operators before your team could have identified the source and suppressed it. 4 to 6. Reeves nodded slowly. He was doing the arithmetic that good commanders do after operations. The version of the operation that did not happen. The casualties that were not taken, the weight of decisions made and not made. It is an uncomfortable arithmetic. It is also a necessary one. The 4 shooters in the main structure, he said, you saw them ahead of us. I saw the light change in the window at 0619. I reported it. I did not have confirmation of how many are their exact positions until they opened up. But you had angle on 3 of the 4 windows already. Yes, the positioning on the ridge line was chosen partly for that angle. The drainage ditch east wall position was also factored into the ridge line selection. She paused. The 4th window was the problem. Okafor's movement to the northeast position was something we had discussed as a contingency during the planning phase. We knew that if the northeast tower guard was down, that northeast angle opened up. You planned for that. We planned for several contingencies. That one happened to be the one we needed. Reeves looked at her for a long moment. Then he leaned back in his chair and said, with the directness of a man who respects directness, I didn't think you could run this operation. I want you to know I understand that I was wrong. Maya looked at him across the table. There was no performance in her expression, no triumph, no residual bitterness, no theatrical magnanimity, just the steady regard of someone who has been doing difficult things for a long time and has made her peace with the fact that people will underestimate her and that the way you respond to being underestimated is by doing the work. I know you didn't, she said. I've known since the planning brief when you ordered redundant coverage of my sector. Did it affect your performance? She thought about this for a genuine moment. No, but it could have. If I were a different kind of person, knowing that the team commander had written me off before the operation started could have introduced doubt. And doubt at 800 is a problem. What stopped it from being a problem for you? She picked up her coffee. Practice, she said simply. I've been underestimated my entire career. I've had a lot of practice not letting it in. Something shifted in Reeves's expression, not sentimentality. He was not a sentimental man. Something more like the specific respect that one professional extends to another when they recognize a quality they genuinely admire. He reached across the table. Not a dramatic gesture, just a hand extended. She shook it. I'd like to request you for the next joint operation, he said. If you're available, talk to my command. I will. He started to rise, then stopped. One more question. Go ahead. The fourth shooter, window 4. Oka 4 gave you the correction, and you applied it and fired in. I'm estimating from the timeline less than 3 seconds from when he finished reading you the data. 2.4 seconds. Ma said I was already doing the preliminary work on the geometry while he was moving into position. 2.4 seconds. At 831 m, full correction applied. Yes. Reeves shook his head slowly, not in disbelief, but in the particular way that a person of genuine competence acknowledges a level of competence that exceeds their own frame of reference. How long did it take you to get there? He asked. To that level. Maya considered the question. 12 years, she said. 12 years since the first day I picked up a rifle. 12 years of mornings at the range before anyone else arrived and evenings at the range after everyone else left. 12 years of building the database in my head. Every condition, every correction, every variable, 12 years of making the mistake first in training so I would not make in the field. She looked at her notebook and 4 hours and 47 minutes of lying on a cold rock this morning doing the work. She closed the notebook. The work is always the answer, she said. It's just not the answer most people want to hear because it's not fast and it's not easy and it doesn't come with a shortcut. Before we reveal exactly what happened during the extraction team's debrief and the request that came down from a level far above Captain Reeves 3 days after this operation, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from and hit subscribe, because what happened next would change the trajectory of Maya Vasquez's career in ways that even she did not see coming. And the details of the commendation that was written about her performance that morning are ones that no one in the military community who has read them has ever forgotten. The commendation was written by Reeves himself, which was unusual. Commendations of this type were typically authored by an operator's direct commanding officer, coordinated upward through the chain of command, and arrived on the desk of the relevant authority carrying the institutional weight of multiple endorsements. This one arrived with a single name on it, written in the blunt, unadorned language of a man who had spent 15 years learning that clarity mattered more than eloquence. It read, in part, Sergeant First Class Vasquez demonstrated a level of sustained precision engagement under combat conditions that I have not previously observed in 14 years of joint and special operations service. Her performance on April 14th was not a product of exceptional circumstances or favorable conditions. It was the product of preparation so thorough that it converted a potential catastrophic failure into a mission success. Without her early identification of the southeast static and her subsequent engagement of 4 armed hostiles in the main structure during the critical extraction window, I estimate Team's 7 casualties at 3 to 4 killed and 2 to 3 wounded. Instead, we have 1 wounded and 7 recovered hostages. That differential is entirely attributable to Phantom 1. The commendation sat on the desk of Brigadier General William Hartley for approximately 40 seconds before he picked up his phone. Maya was informed of the general's interest in a meeting 2 days later in the kind of toast message that does not explain itself and does not need to. She drove to the meeting in a vehicle borrowed from the motor pool, arrived 7 minutes early, and sat in the outer office reading a ballistics manual she had been meaning to get back to for 3 weeks. When she was shown in, Hartley was standing at the window of his office, not sitting behind his desk in the authority position, but standing at the window, which Maya read as a deliberate choice, a signal that this was not going to be a formal session. Sergeant Vasquez, he said without turning around immediately. 14 seconds. Sir, he turned. He was 61 years old with a kind of face that has been compressed by decades of difficult decisions into something that no longer changes easily. And he was looking at her with an expression that she found difficult to read. Not the appraising look she was used to, the one that measured and categorized and usually arrived at underestimation. Something different. 14 seconds, he said again. 4 targets, 4 shots. 800 M plus in 14 seconds. I've been in this business for 37 years, and I have spoken to people whose job it is to evaluate these things, and none of them will give me a number for how rare that is, because the number is too small to be useful. Maya said nothing. There was nothing to say that would improve on the silence. Reeves tells me he owes you 4 lives. Reeves is generous, she said. His accounting for worst-case scenario. Is accounting for what he observed, which is what I'm doing. Hartley moved to his desk, not to sit behind it, but to pick something up, a folder, which he held for a moment before setting back down. I have a tasking that is currently sitting without an assigned Overwatch element. It's a joint operation, multi-agency, with a hostage component. The profile is more complex than the April 14th operation. The distances are greater, and the terrain is more variable. He looked at her steadily. I would like Phantom 1 assigned to Overwatch. Maya held his gaze. I would need to review the full intelligence package and the terrain profile before I can make a capability assessment. Of course, I would need 48 hours for a site survey. You have 7 to 2. She nodded once then. Yes, sir. Phantom 1 is available. Hartley allowed himself something that was not quite a smile, but occupied the same territory. One more thing, Sergeant. He reached into the folder and withdrew something. Not documents, but a small item that he set on the desk between them. A compass, old, well-used, the kind that has been carried for years, and shows it that belonged to my first Overwatch element in Desert Storm. A sergeant named Torres. Best shot I ever worked with at the time. He paused. Torres would have been impressed by your file. Maya looked at the compass. She understood what was being offered. Not the compass itself, but the lineage it represented. The acknowledgement that she occupied a specific space in a specific tradition. She picked it up carefully. Thank you, sir, she said, and she meant it. The mountains of northern Afghanistan do not look like the mountains of anywhere else on Earth. They have a specific quality of light in the early morning. A cold blue-gray luminescence that falls across the ridge lines like something poured rather than something shining, as though the light itself is reluctant to arrive and is only doing so under obligation. The rock is ancient here, compressed by geological time into formations that have no interest in human concerns and no awareness of human passage. Eagles circle at altitudes that would require oxygen equipment for men on foot. The wind comes from directions that change without announcement and carries temperatures that can drop 15 degrees in 40 minutes as weather systems move through the high passes without warning. It is not a forgiving landscape. It is not a landscape that accommodates mistakes. It is, however, a landscape that rewards patience and patience. The specific, disciplined, almost meditative form of patience that allows a person to remain perfectly still for hours at a time, while the cold works its way through every layer of clothing and the wind shifts and the light changes and the target does. What does not appear was the quality that Maya Vasquez had developed more completely than any other in her 12 years of work. She was 31 months past the April 14th operation. A lot had changed, a lot had not. The briefing for Operation Ironclad had taken place 6 days earlier in a secure facility 40 kilometers south of Kabul in a room that had the particular atmosphere of a place where serious people gathered to discuss serious problems without the luxury of time. 12 people around a conference table. Military intelligence interagency. The kind of room where every person present has a clearance level that would surprise most civilians and a personal history that would surprise them more. Maya had sat at the end of the table, which was where she preferred to sit, the position that allows you to observe everyone in the room simultaneously without appearing to do so. Okafor was beside her, his notebook open, his pen moving in the steady shorthand he used for operational briefings. The intelligence officer, a woman named Carver, mid-40s, the kind of precise and contained manner that comes from years of working in environments where imprecision has consequences, had walked them through the situation in the methodical, led way that good intelligence officers present complex problems. 15 hostages, not 7, 15, a mixed group, 8 American aid workers for European journalists, and 3 local national interpreters who had been working with a NATO-affiliated research organization. Taken 22 days ago from a convoy that had been ambushed on a mountain road at a choke point that the intelligence community now assessed had been identified by hostile forces through surveillance of the convoy's route pattern over the preceding 3 weeks. Patient methodical surveillance, the kind that requires time and discipline and a degree of operational sophistication that was higher than initial assessments had indicated. The holding location was identified 4 days ago, Carvey said, advancing a satellite image onto the main screen. A compound in the Kuno province highlands, approximately 18 kilometers from the Pakistan border. Elevation is 2,140 m. The compound sits on a plateau, with a 360 degrees drop on all sides, except the western approach, which is the only vehicle-accessible route in Maya, studied the image. A compound on a plateau. The elevation alone created a set of ballistic considerations that flatland operations did not require. The reduced air density at altitude. The different wind behavior in mountain terrain. The way temperature gradients created unpredictable turbulence in the air column between her potential position and the target. And the platform itself was a problem. A plateau with drops on 3 sides meant that any overwatch position would need to be either higher than the compound, which meant significantly higher given the plateau's own elevation, or at a distance that compensated for the lack of elevation dominance. The western approach was vehicle accessible, which meant it was the approach any rescue team would use, which meant it was the approach any competent hostile force would have covered first. What are the distances? She asked. Carver pulled up a measurement overlay. From a nearest viable elevated overwatch position to the compound's eastern phase, 1,420 m. The room was quiet for a moment. 1,420 m. For reference, a standard military sniper qualification course requires shots to 600 m. Advanced courses push to 800. The international sniper competition record for precision target engagement is routinely set around 1,200 m by the best practitioners in the world. Beyond 1,400 meters, the ballistic variables, wind drift, Coriolis effect, atmospheric density, bullet drop, multiply, and compound in ways that push the limits of both equipment and human calculation. 1,420 m in mountain terrain at altitude. Has anyone run the ballistics on that position? The intelligence officer asked. I will, Maya said simply. Kava looked at her for a moment, then moved on. The extraction plan was built around a helicopter insertion onto the western plateau approach. 2 MH-60M Blackhawks carrying a combined force of 14 operators from a joint Armor-Navy element with Maya and Okafor deployed separately to the eastern overwatch position via a 48-hour ground infiltration that would begin the night before the main force insertion. 48 hours on foot in mountain terrain at altitude to reach a position no one was entirely certain was achievable. The eastern position is theoretical. The mission commander, a colonel named Bridges, said in the tone of someone who has just said something significant and is watching to see how the room receives it. We believe it is accessible, but we have not done ground confirmation. The satellite imagery indicates a suitable rock formation, but satellite imagery does not tell us about ground stability, the presence of local population movement in the area, or whether the position provides the angles we need. Phantom 1 will be making an assessment call on the ground. Maya nodded. That's standard at 1,400 m. The distance is a variable, she said. The position quality and the preparation time are the factors I need. If the position is clean and I have 72 hours, the distance is manageable. The colonel looked at her with the careful expression of a man who is trying to decide whether to believe something that stretches his previous understanding of what is manageable. Then he looked at Reeves, who was sitting 3 seats to Mia's left. Reeves said without expression, "Believe her." 2 hours before the team's insertion, high on a rock face that no vehicle could reach and no casual observer would have reason to look for, Maya Vasquez completed her position preparation and lay down behind her rifle for the face time in the operational stance. The view from the position was extraordinary and terrible in equal measure. Extraordinary because the mountain landscape spread out below and around it in every direction with a particular magnificence of terrain that has never been made comfortable for human occupation. Terrible because the compound viewed from this distance at this angle was very small. Not small in the way that things look small from distance, which is a perceptual phenomenon that the brain can compensate for. Small in the operational sense. The specific smallness of a target that requires you to place a projectile traveling at 860 meters per second into a space measured in centime after it has traveled 1420 m through air that is moving and changing and conspiring with gravity and the rotation of the Earth to pull it away from where you need it to go. She settled in. She began watching. She began building the database for the next 31 hours through the remaining daylight of the first day through the night, during which she and Okafor rotated 3-hour observation and rest periods through the entire second day and into the second evening. She did nothing but observe, measure, record, and calculate the wind at the position, the wind at the compound inferred from visible indicators at distance, the temperature gradient between her elevation and the compound, the way the morning light changed the thermal behavior of the air over the plateau, the patrol patterns of the guards, the number of armed individuals, the entry and exit points, the structures, the vehicles, the shadows. She built a mental model of that compound that was more detailed and more accurate than any intelligence photograph could provide, because photographs capture moments and Maya was capturing patterns. Photographs show what is. Observation over time shows what is likely, what is recurring, what is the behavior of a system rather than the appearance of a snapshot. By hour 31, she knew the compound the way she knew her rifle. The insertion happened at 0320 on the third day. 2 Black Hawks coming in low from the west, using the mountain terrain as radar masking, dropping the assault element onto the plateau's western approach while still 1 kilometer from the compound and moving the last kilometer on foot. The aircraft were gone before the guard towers could have had time to do more than wonder at the sound. At 0340, the assault team was in position outside the compound's western wall. Maya's radio was live. She could hear the controlled breathing of people preparing themselves for the precise and dangerous work of walking into a place where armed people did not want them. Phantom 1, this is Bridges. What are you seeing? 3 guards visible on the exterior. Northwest tower, 1 guard currently facing north. Southeast corner, 1 guard moving on what appears to be a 40 m patrol pattern. Main gate, 1 guard stationary. Interior is obscured by the wall, except for the portions visible above the parapet. I have thermal imaging confirming body heat signatures in the central structure. I count between 12 and 16 signatures, but the thermal penetration through the structure's walls is inconsistent at this range, and I cannot give you an accurate count. 12 to 16 inside, 3 outside. Yes, plus any unknowns and positions I cannot observe. She paused. The drainage approach on the south wall has a heat signature that I cannot fully account for. It may be an equipment heat source, generator, coolant, vehicle exhaust, or it may be a person. I want you to know about it. Copy. Also, the Northwest Guard has been looking west more frequently in the last 12 minutes than at any other point in my observation window. He may have heard the aircraft. He may be on a heightened alert status. What's his current orientation? Still north, but his body angle has changed. His scanning wider than his previous pattern. Copy that. Bridges to all elements. Northwest tower is elevated awareness. Adjust approach. A brief pause. Phantom 1, I need you to be aware. The distances we are working with today are beyond what any of us have done before in a live environment. Are you confident in your capability at this range? The question was asked professionally without condescension, without the specific dismissiveness that Maya had encountered in other briefing rooms from other commanders. Bridges was simply doing what any commander should do before relying on an asset, verifying. I am confident, she said. I want 4 to 5 seconds between targets to verify the next position. Do not call for simultaneous engagements. You have 4 to 5 seconds longer if you need it. 4 to 5 is enough. She did not tell him that she had already run the solutions for every probable target position she had identified in the previous 31 hours. She had done this not as an exercise, but as a live calculation, building the firing solution for each position based on the current conditions, current wind, current temperature, current atmospheric data, and adjusting each solution as the conditions changed through the night and into the early morning. The solutions were in her notebook. They were also in her head. The notebook was the backup. The breach began at 0347. The assault team went over the western wall at 3 points simultaneously. Quiet, fast, the kind of movement that produces almost no sound if you have practiced enough, and if you have the right equipment, and if the people you are working with are the specific category of excellent that only comes from selection processes designed to find people who do not break under pressure. Maya watched the Northwest Tower Guard. At 0348, he stopped scanning and looked directly west. He had heard something. Phantom 1 to Bridges. Northwest Tower Guard has oriented west. He has identified something. Engage. 1443 m. She had updated this specific distance measurement 4 times during the observation period as she refined her position geometry. The wind at her position was 4 kilometers perf northwest. The wind at the compound, based on the smoke drift from the generator stack she had been reading for 31 hours, was running at approximately 6 kilometers an hour, slightly more suddenly. The temperature at her position was 3 Celsius. The air density at the compound's 2,140 m elevation was meaningfully lower than standard atmosphere. She had already done this math. She had done it and then done it again and then done it a third time 6 hours ago and verified that the answer was the same each time. She applied the solution squeezed at 1,443 m. The bullet's flight time is approximately 2 full seconds. In 2 seconds, the world continues. The guard continues. The wind continues. 2 seconds is a very long time for a projectile that has left the barrel and is no longer under any human control. It is now entirely subject to the physics of the environment through which it must travel. Maya watched the guard through the scope. 2 seconds he dropped. Okafor let out a single quiet breath through his nose. He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "Wind held." It held. Mayer agreed. "Target down Northwest Tower." She reported. "Copy." Bridges said, "Team is moving." What followed over the next 23 minutes was the most demanding sustained engagement of Maya Vasquez's operational career. The Southeast Corner Guard heard the team moving at 0351 and raise an alarm before he could be subdued. A single shout, not long, cut off quickly, but enough. Enough to wake people. Enough to bring armed individuals who had been sleeping in the central structure to windows and doorways, and the kind of ready but disoriented state that is more dangerous in some ways than a prepared defense because disoriented people with weapons make unpredictable decisions. 4 men came out of the central structure's main entrance at 0353. They were armed, and they were moving, and they were oriented toward the sound of the breach team's movement along the west wall interior. For hostiles, main structure entrance. They have your team's position. Ma said her voice had the flat formational quality of someone reporting weather. Not because she was unaffected by what was happening, but because effect is not useful in this moment, and she had long since learned to put it somewhere else until the work was done. Engage. Bridges said the 4 individuals were moving. Moving targets at 1,400 meters introduce a calculation that goes beyond the standard ballistic solution. The lead calculation, the assessment of speed and direction, and the anticipation of where the target will be when the bullet arrives rather than where the target is when you fire. At 1,400 m, 2 seconds of flight time means 2 seconds of movement to account for. F target moving right approximately 1.4 meters per second. Lead calculation 2.88 m at distance. She applied it and fired 4 to 5 seconds for the second target. Not because she needed 4 to 5 seconds. She could have gone faster, but because she had promised 4 to 5, and she was using the time to reread the wind and verify her input data had not changed in the interval. Second target stationary, now having taken cover behind a vehicle in the compound yard. partially visible edge of right shoulder and right arm. The same type of shot she had made at 800 meters on April 14th, now scaled to 400. She breathed. She fired. Third target had moved inside the structure, which meant she no longer had him. She reported this to Bridges. Team has him, Bridges said, which meant the breach element had engaged and resolved the third individual. Fourth target came back out of the main entrance at 0356. Moving fast, moving for the southern wall, clearly trying to reach the vehicle bay and presumably a vehicle or communication system. He was running at approximately 5 meters per second lead at 1,400 m for a target running at 5 meters per second. 10 m of lead at 1,400 m is a hold point that places the aim point well clear of any visible target indicator. You are not shooting at the person. You're shooting at a point in space that the person will occupy in 2 seconds based on your assessment of their current speed and direction. Assuming they do not change either. They changed. He cut left at 0356 plus approximately 1 second. She tracked. She adjusted. She waited for the geometry to close again for the lead calculation to reestablish itself around the new direction. He cut left again. She tracked his zigzagging. Okafor said quietly, "I see him." A person zigzagging to avoid fire at 1,400 meters from a sniper they do not know is there and cannot see is not a rational tactical response. It is a fear response. The instinct to make yourself unpredictable because unpredictability feels safer than running in a straight line. It is the right instinct. It does genuinely make you harder to hit, but it is not impossible to manage if you understand the pattern. Zigzagging runners under stress create predictable patterns. They alternate direction at intervals that are governed by their own stride cadence and the physical reality of changing direction at speed. The intervals are not random. They cannot be random because the human body has biomechanical constraints. If you watch long enough and your mind is doing the right kind of work, the pattern emerges. Maya watched for 2 full cycles of the pattern. Then she fired ahead of the next cut. He ran into it. Fourth hostile down. She said, "I am continuing observation in the compound." The assault team was working through the central structure, clearing room by room in the controlled and deliberate manner of people who understand that speed and thoroughness are not opposites in this context, but rather 2 dimensions of the same quality. 8 minutes into the internal clearing operation, Bridges' voice came over the radio. "We have the hostages. All 15 beginning extraction." Maya kept watching because the operation was not over until the last operator was off that plateau. At 0419, as the extraction team was moving the hostages to the western approach for helicopter pickup, 3 vehicles appeared on the road from the east. They had not been in any intelligence assessment. They were not accounted for in the mission plan. They were simply there. 3 technical trucks, each mounted with a heavy machine gun, moving at speed along the eastern access road that the intelligence package had characterized as a secondary route used primarily for supply movement. Bridges. I have 3 vehicle-mounted technicals on the eastern approach. Estimated time to compound perimeter 7 minutes at current speed. A silence on the radio. The kind of silence that contains very rapid thinking. Can you engage vehicles at that distance? I can engage the personnel operating the weapons. If I take the gunners, the vehicles are less of a threat, but the drivers will still be mobile. She was already doing the distance calculation. The vehicles were approximately 1,100 m from her position, moving targets, but moving along a road, which meant their direction was predictable. The gunners were exposed, standing or sitting in the truck beds, operating the mounted weapons. Clear target profiles. What do you need? I need your extraction to move faster. Get everyone to the LZ. The Blackhawks need to be on the ground in 3 minutes. 3 minutes is I know what 3 minutes is, she said. I will buy you 3 minutes. Get moving. She did not wait for his acknowledgement. She was already running the solution on the lead vehicle. 18 m. Moving target speed approximately 40 kilometers per hour on a road that was curving gently to the right, which meant the track was slightly arcing rather than linear, which introduced a small correction for the changing heading angle over the flight time. She fired. The first vehicle's gunner went down. The vehicle did not stop. The driver kept moving, perhaps not yet understanding what had happened. She cycled and moved to the second vehicle. 1,120 m. Now, the second vehicle, slightly behind, and to the right of the first, its gunner visible, standing watching the compound ahead. She fired. The second gunner went down. Third vehicle was now 160 m, having accelerated when the first two engagements had. She could see this in the sudden increase in headlight intensity as the vehicle surged. The gunner on the third vehicle had dropped below the level of the truck bed. Having apparently understood what was happening, she waited. He had to come back up. The gun had to be manned if the vehicle was going to serve its purpose. He was in there calculating the same thing. She was calculating whether the risk of exposure was worth the tactical value of having the weapon in play. He came up. She fired. 3 gunners down, she said into the radio. Vehicles are still mobile, but weapons are unmanned. Your window is closing. Where are the helicopters? 2 minutes out, Bridges said, and his voice had the particular quality of a man who is running and talking at the same time. You have 90 seconds before those vehicles reach the perimeter. The vehicles were continuing to move. Unmanned weapons, but 3 vehicles full of armed individuals approaching a compound where the assault team was in the final stages of extraction. The drivers were visible through their windshields, but engaging a windshield target in a moving vehicle at 1,000 m with any confidence in the outcome was a different problem than engaging an exposed gunner. Glass deflects, angles change, the variables multiply. She made the assessment in approximately 2 seconds. Okafor, I need wind at 1,000 m. What are you reading from the lower terrain indicators? Okafor shifted his spotting scope to read the lower elevation wind indicators. Dust movement on the road. The behavior of scrub vegetation along the eastern approach. The drift of exhaust from the vehicles themselves. 8 kilometers per hour east-northeast. Consistent below the thermal layer. 8 kilometers per hour. That was stronger than what she was reading at her position. The wind was accelerating through the valley, terrain below her. She adjusted the hold. The lead vehicle's windshield was visible. The driver's profile was there, a dark shape behind the glass. Leaning slightly forward, driving fast, she fired. The vehicle veered sharply left and stopped, its front end dropping into the road's shallow drainage ditch. The other 2 vehicles brake. Uncertainty, the most valuable thing you can create in an adversary at a critical moment. Uncertainty buys time. Time is what was needed. Helicopters. She said 60 seconds. Bridges said she was already working the solution on the second vehicle's driver. The second vehicle had stopped, and its occupants were beginning to dismount, which was tactically the correct response to someone engaging their vehicle from distance, because dismounting removes the vehicle as a large trackable target and disperses the threat into smaller, less visible elements. But dismounting takes time, and in the time it takes to dismount and orient and move, a great many things can happen. Team is at the LZ. Bridges said 30 seconds. The Blackhawks came in from the west. Low and fast, there wrote a noise arriving before their silhouettes resolved against the lightening sky. The dismounted individuals from the 3 vehicles were moving toward the compound. Weapons up, still uncertain about the origin of the fire that had taken their gunners and their lead driver. They were moving fast, but they were not moving with the specific organized purpose of people who know exactly what they are doing. In that specific quality of operational uncertainty was what Maya had been buying with every shot. The helicopters landed, the extraction team and the 15 hostages loaded in the organized chaos of a timer-assured helicopter pickup. People moving fast, people being helped, the rotors making communication impossible without radio. The whole thing taking the 43 seconds at a well-rehearsed element needs to load that many people onto 2 aircraft. 43 seconds. The dismounted hostiles were inside the compound perimeter by the time the second helicopter lifted. They arrived at the LZ 22 seconds after the second helicopter was airborne. 22 seconds. That is the margin. That is what 1,400 meters of precision engagement over 23 minutes of sustained operation had purchased. 22 seconds. The debrief happened in Kabul in the same kind of room as the previous debrief, but with more people around the table and a quality of attention in the room that was different from anything Maya had experienced before. There were individuals present who did not introduce themselves and whose rank insignia she did not immediately recognize. And this told her that the report of what had happened on the plateau had traveled faster and farther than debriefs typically travel. Bridges ran the formal debrief with a methodical precision she had come to associate with him. Thorough, non-emotive, focused on the operational facts. Timeline engagements, decisions, outcomes. 15 hostages recovered, all alive. 0 friendly casualties. 11 confirmed hostile engagements from the Overwatch position. 11 at distances ranging from 980 m to 1,443 m in mountain terrain at altitude against a mix of static and moving targets over a sustained operation window of 32 minutes. When the formal debrief ended, the people who had not introduced themselves asked to speak to me privately. This was not a request that carried the quality of a request. She understood this and remained in her chair as the rest of the room emptied. There were 3 of them, 2 men and a woman. The woman did the talking. "We have a program," the woman said. "It is not something we discuss in large rooms. It involves a very small number of people who have demonstrated a very specific combination of capabilities." She paused. "You have come to our attention 3 times in the past 18 months. Twice for long-range engagements that were assessed after the fact to be at the outer limit of what we believed was achievable in a live operational environment, and once for something else." "What was the 3rd time?" Maya asked. "You reported an anomalous shadow in a compound surveillance assessment that every other trained observer who looked at the same imagery missed. And you were correct." The woman opened a folder, not dramatically, just practically the way a professional opens a folder. "You have a quality of observational analysis that is distinct from your shooting capability. Both are exceptional. Together, they represent something we want to retain and develop in a context that is more strategically significant than individual operation support." Maya looked at her steadily. "What kind of context?" "The kind where the decisions you make and the observations you record affect outcomes at a level above individual compound operations." The woman paused. "The kind where you would have access to intelligence resources that would make your current preparation process significantly more capable. And the kind where the distances involved would make 400 meters look like a standard day." The room was very quiet for a moment. Maya thought about the compass in her jacket pocket, Torres's compass, that Hartley had given her, the lineage of people who had done difficult work in difficult places and had passed something forward into the hands of those who came after them. She thought about 12 years of early mornings at the range and evenings at the range and the cold rock of a Rigeline and 31 hours of observation and the 2C flight time of a bullet that must carry the entire weight of the calculation that went into it. She thought about Okafor, who would follow wherever she was assigned, because that was the kind of partnership they had built. She thought about the 7 people from April 14th and the 15 people from this morning, and the fact that there would always be more, and that somewhere right now, in a compound or basement or mountain holding location, there were people who were waiting for someone to make the call and hold the position and do the work. She looked at the woman across the table. "Tell me about the program," she said. They told her it took 4 hours. By the end, the morning light had fully arrived and was coming through the briefing room's high windows at an angle that made the dust in the air visible. Particles floating in the shafts of light with the aimless, peaceful quality of things that are not subject to gravity's full demand. The program was called Cornerstone. It was in the dry institutional language of its founding documents, a precision capability development and employment initiative designed to provide strategic-level direct action support in denied environments. In practice, what this meant was that there were certain situations, rare, specific, carefully evaluated situations where a single person in the right position with the right capability could produce an outcome that no other asset or method could produce. Where the choice was not between a small operation and a large operation, but between a single, perfectly positioned expert and nothing at all. Cornerstone was the framework that identified those situations, prepared the people who could address them, and sent those people to places that did not appear in any after-action report using any name that could be traced. Maya would be the 9th person to enter the program since its founding. She would be the first woman. She was not surprised by either number. There's one requirement. The woman said at the end of the 4 hours, you cannot tell anyone you're entering this program. Not family, not colleagues, not Okafor. Maya thought about this. Okafor, who had been 18 into her left for 14 months, who had read the wind when she needed the wind and had moved into position without asking why, who had said nothing, just a single quiet breath through his nose when the bullet found its target at 1,443 m. Okay, comes with me, she said, not aggressively. As a fact, the three people looked at each other. The program has not previously used spotter-shooter pairs. The woman said, then you've been leaving half the capability on the table. Mears said simply, a precision shooter without a qualified spotter is operating at approximately 70% of their potential in complex environments. Okafor is the best spotter I have worked with. He is also an exceptional observer and analyst in his own right. If you want what I can do, you take both of us. A silence. Then one of the men, the older one who had been quiet throughout, said, Paul Ocker's file. To the other man, not to Maya. But the direction was clear. They pulled a file. An hour later, they said yes. 2 weeks after the Cornerstone briefing, Maya Vasquez sat in a small apartment in a city that this story will not name, looking out of a window at a street that looked like 100 other streets in a dozen other countries she had passed through in the previous 12 years. Okafor was at the table behind her going through terrain analysis material with the same focused attention he brought to everything. The apartment was rented. The names on the lease were not their names. The phones they were carrying were not registered to anything that could lead back to either of them. They had been given a new operational profile, a new set of parameters, a briefing that made every previous operation look by comparison like the kind of thing you train for rather than the kind of thing you do. The target distance in the upcoming operation was 1,900 m, just shy of 2 kilometers. At that distance, the Coriolis effect, the deflection of a projectile caused by the rotation of the Earth, becomes a measurable factor that must be accounted for in the firing solution. At that distance, the bullet will be in the air for approximately 3 seconds. In 3 seconds, the Earth rotates beneath the bullet's flight path by a distance that at the latitudes involved requires a correction of approximately 12 centimeters. 12 centimeters that have nothing to do with wind or gravity, but simply with the fact that the planet is spinning and the bullet is not. Maya had been recalculating the solution for this operation for 11 days. She had been building a new database from the intelligence package's terrain analysis, filling in gaps with her own research, running the ballistics in every weather scenario she could generate from the historical climate data for the target region. She had fired 400 rounds through a loner rifle, the same model and caliber she would use in preparation conditions designed to simulate the target environment as closely as possible. She was ready. She believed, as ready as it was possible to be. Okafor looked up from the terrain analysis. Wind's going to be the problem. He said, the valley orientation creates a Vinny effect that the historical data shows can go from 4 kilometers per hour to 18 in under 2 minutes. I know if it goes to 18 while the bullet's in the air. I know Okafor. He looked at her for a moment. In 14 months of partnership, they had developed the ability to have complete conversations in very few words, or in silence, or in the specific quality of a look. This look said, I know you know, and I am saying it anyway, because saying things out loud is part of how we prepare, and both of us know that. She looked back at him with something that said, I know, and you're right, and we will figure out the way we always figure it out. He nodded, went back to the terrain analysis. She went back to the window outside. The street was doing what streets do, moving anonymous, indifferent to the work being done in the apartment above it. People walking, vehicles passing, the ordinary texture of a city going about its business without any awareness of the particular weight being held by the two people in the apartment. Maya looked at the street and thought about what the woman from Cornerstone had said. Situations where the choice is between a single perfectly positioned expert and nothing at all. She thought about what it means to be the person in that position. To be the specific individual who has built the specific capability that makes the difference between an outcome and a catastrophe. To carry that capability not as a burden. She had decided long ago that it was not a burden, but as a responsibility to the preparation that created it, responsibility to the people who will need it when the moment arrives. She reached into her jacket and found Torres's compass, held it in her palm. The metal was worn smooth by years of hands that had held it before hairs, and it had the specific weight of something that has been carried for a long time and has earned its density. She closed her fingers around it. The next operation would begin in 6 days. She had 6 days to prepare. She would use all of them because that is what it means to be the person who holds the position when no one else can. It is not the 14 seconds of a firefight or the single perfect shot that travels 2 kilometers through mountain air and account for the rotation of the earth and the behavior of wind that changes in under 2 minutes. It is not the moment of performance, however extraordinary that moment may be. It is the 12 years before the moment. The early mornings and the late evenings and the 400 rounds through a loner rifle and the 31 hours on a cold rock face, building the database and the compass in your pocket that carries the weight of everyone who came before you. It is the unglamorous, repetitive, patient work of becoming ready for the moment before the moment arrives. It is doing the work. It is always doing the work. And out there right now, in some compound, in some basement, in some mountain holding location you will never see and I will never name, there are people who are counting on someone to have done the work, counting on someone to be in position, counting on the person on the ridge line to have been there since 25, still impatient and ready, doing the work that will determine whether they come home. Maya Vasquez clicked the compass closed. She picked up a notebook. She went back to the calculations. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more stories of extraordinary individuals who do extraordinary things in the shadows when no one is watching and nothing is easy and the work is always the only answer. Thanks for watching.